Hello, art people! Today we are going to be going into the first of the absolute art fundamentals, lines. Let's make this disappear. Now, what do I mean by a line? Well, it should be pretty obvious. It's one of these. It may also be one of these. It can even, and this one may confuse a few people at first, be one of these. We're literally talking when you talk from one point and you move to the next point. That is a line. So it doesn't matter if it's a little wobbly. It doesn't matter if it's super straight. That's not super straight. It's basically just lines. Now, don't take these for granted. Drawing a good line can be the difference between having terrible art and having pretty decent art. You want to be able to control what type of line you want appearing on your canvas. So, let's go through a few quick basics of them. So, we're starting for your line. You want to learn to keep your art material. I'm just going to basically say pen or pencil here, but this can apply to something like brushes, pastels. You could even in theory be referring to it when sculpting. You want to be able to make a good line on a sculpture. You basically want to learn to keep the pen down from start to finish. Even if the line isn't straight, it will look a lot better. So what you want to avoid doing is what's known as chicken scratches. So chicken scratches are when you're going like this, and you're doing it just a bit at a time, because you're not quite sure where the line's going. Like maybe you want to draw a full face, and instead of just drawing a few quick lines like that, you're not sure. So you just try to figure it out as you go along. And yeah, you're not, because drawing a circle can be kind of hard when you're first starting off, so it gets a bit wobbly. So you end up chicken scratching all over the place, and you want to generally avoid that. Instead, I would just recommend just practicing lines by themselves. Just go nuts. Just literally put your pen down on the paper and just keep moving without taking it off, and just get used to drawing all sorts of lines in all directions. It's a warm-up exercise. When it comes down to it, you're going to be drawing a lot of different lines in a lot of different directions, and you really want to essentially just be able to put all those lines up whenever you need them. So one initial difficulty a lot of people may have is drawing extremely long lines, and although I can't directly show you here, one of the key problems that most people do is they draw from their wrist, so they go like this, and that can be good for some long lines when you're doing them like this. But let's say you wanted a really long line. If you just try to keep your elbow locked in place, you eventually kind of run out. What you really want to be doing, and let me just give myself a new layer here. What you really want to be doing is drawing from the elbow. So if you think of where your elbow is, rather than drawing twisting your wrist, which you may find yourself naturally doing, learn to keep your wrist straight and draw from the elbow. So if you do that, you can manage nice, long, fluid lines. So I'm doing this moving just my elbow. And as you can see, the lines are just a lot cleaner, a lot smoother. They just come out onto the paper. Next up, besides just the length of the line, you also want to be concerned about the thickness of the line. Thickness is relative and should be intended. You should be there thinking, I want to draw a thin line, I want to draw a thick line. When you're drawing, you often find, a lot of people will find they're holding down their material in such a way that it only allows them to do a certain type of line. So maybe they'll just be pushing down really hard because they're just trying to keep it controlled. And even if you get a nice straight line, it means you're not really that good at making the thin lines. Or maybe you're the other way around. Maybe you're just kind of, you're almost too worried about committing. So you just kind of keep it down on there and you keep it light. So thick and thin lines should be intentional. And a good rule is to know what each line is essentially doing. So thick lines are usually there to highlight an object. They're usually the lines that will go around it. So the width of your line should be intended. When you're drawing it, if you're wanting to highlight an object, for example, you want to use a thicker line. If you're wanting for details, then you should have a thinner line. If we just draw a quick example here, let's draw, say, a t-shirt. So with the outline of the t-shirt, you generally want nice, thick lines because it's the object that's on the outside containing all the others. And then when you, say, if you want to draw like a little icon on the t-shirt, you would draw them in thinner lines, where they're just keeping them as thin as possible. And you can see here, it kind of helps highlight the object. So if we wanted to try doing it the way around, we find we'll have to come into a few problems here. So if we try for a thin, shirt, and again, I'm a fantastic artist, as you can see. And then if we try to do thick lines in the middle here, we start to see that we kind of get little problems. Although it works, we quickly find ourselves running out of space. And again, it's because as you try to go thick on the inside, thin on the outside, it just doesn't quite work. So usually better to have it the other way around. Thick lines on the outside tend to make things a lot bolder. So don't be afraid to use different sizes of lines to achieve different effects. And again, these are just the type of things where you play around. And then we have the type of line that everybody was expecting from the start, the straight line. So we just literally go boop and straight. Now this, as some Photoshoppers may have just noticed there, is me just using a ruler. There's nothing wrong with using a ruler for your straight lines. You can try and make straight lines using just your hands as best you can, but there's always going to be a certain amount of wiggle no matter how straight you can be. Often you'll find speed will result in straighter lines, but in the end it doesn't matter. If you need to use a ruler, feel free to use a ruler or whatever other straight device you may have on there. So let's just end up with a few quick exercises to go through. So the exercises we have for lines are fairly simple lines. Basically, draw long lines of any type working from your elbow. So again, plant your keep your wrist as straight as possible. Think of it from drawing from your elbow. Put the pen down and go from point A to point B. I mean, you could even give yourself a little goal on each side, and you can go woo and woo. And of course, remember, not just lines, but also curvy lines. And we can even go for blocky lines. The idea should be essentially you're keeping your hand on the panic belt and you're getting used to it. You're avoiding the chicken scratches. And then for the second part of the exercise, try drawing over the same line several times, keeping it the same line each time. This would be essentially kind of similar to in a sports exercise. You may try to perform the same action multiple times, like kicking a football or jumping over hurdles. You basically want to get that muscle memory in so that your body knows to be able to do certain lines each time the same way. So I've selected another colour here, and I'm just going to try and draw over each line. Obviously, it won't always be precise, but you want to be able to say that you're just generally, your intention should be clear there, like getting from A to B. And then the same with the squiggly line. And the blocky line. So there's nothing too special here. There's no great secret going on. This really is just practicing extreme basics. So, and just keep going over them. So the idea is to bring up the control in your wrist. So you're essentially achieving a same desired result each time. Okay, and that's lines. Thank you for listening.